Container and Safeplace is an activity that is frequently used with EMDR therapy, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. The reason that this activity is primarily used by EMDR as a coping strategy is because the goal of this activity is to use visualization and that processing to be able to take ourselves from a state of distress to neutral and then to calm. Now, we're using visualization because it's actually a really helpful tool for our brains to be able to practice or to even just do something. If you think about a runner who's about to go on a race, they're visualizing the process that they're going to go through in that race. And what's effectively happening is that their brains are practicing. I don't know if you're like me, but I know that there have been lots of times in my life where I've been having an imaginary conversation or really argument with somebody while I'm in the shower. And in my head, we're having this elaborate discussion and I'm getting in all of my shots that I want to, and it just escalates and escalates and escalates. And what inevitably ends up happening to me in those situations is I either feel really calm because I got through it and it was resolved, or I feel really heightened because I just feel more angry or more upset about that situation or with that person. And that's because what's happening is that my brain is actually going through all of the processes that it probably would if I was actually engaging in that activity, in that conversation. Our brains sometimes don't know the difference between our imagination and what's happening in reality. Now, don't take that too far. What we're really talking about is that as we're practicing things or moves or conversations in our head, our brain is building neural pathways and it's establishing a system for us to be able to actually enact that. This is sometimes the same case as like building up the courage. We're going through these processes in our head and visualizing what this conversation is going to look like in order to have the courage to do it, or practicing a speech before we give it in our heads, not out loud. I'll give one last example for how I think visualization is helpful, and then we'll move on. I think for anybody who has read code or knows what code is, you can look at it and be really overwhelmed. And sometimes when we're thinking about things that we want our brains to be able to do, like being able to cope with something that's really hard or being able to process through something that just feels stuck, it can feel like we have to figure out the code in order to make that happen. And if you've ever seen a website, you're not seeing the code, you're seeing the visualization of that code. And our brains have this interesting ability to take it backwards and to visualize what this website or this app is supposed to look like, and then naturally turn that into code for us. I say all this so that you can know that I say all this to kind of lay the groundwork for what we're trying to do. It's not just this imaginary fantasy that we're taking ourselves on. It's actually visualizing a process by which we can take the distress that we're experiencing, contain it in something outside of ourselves, and then go to a place that feels calm and soothing for us so that our brains can then go through a process of letting go of some of this distress and then moving to a state of being calm and functional. Now, as we go through this activity, I'm going to be giving you certain specifications for both your container and your safe place. And what I want you to do is I want you to take your time with this process, even if that means pausing the video for a time or watching through it once and then watching through it again to actually participate. Take this at your own pace and allow things to be malleable. What I mean by that is you might at first picture a container that's a clay vase. And then I tell you something about how the container should be made out of a material or magically enhanced so that it cannot be destroyed. And in your head, that just doesn't work anymore. It can't make sense for this vase to be indestructible. And so I'd encourage you, allow it to change away from that vase and become something else. Maybe it becomes a safe. As you go through this process, you will start to see it solidify for yourself and things become more tangible. And honestly, for me, I think that my container and my safe place were morphing for probably 6 months after I started this activity and was practicing it regularly. Things would just change here and there that made the visualization a little bit more approachable for me and something that I was able to engage in more easily. I'll also add the caveat that sometimes visualization and guided imagery is not helpful for people. So if you're somebody that historically has not been able to engage very effectively, or maybe guided imagery just hasn't been helpful for you, that's okay. You can still try to engage in this activity, and I'd encourage you to try it and to be able to decide for yourself whether or not it's something that's going to be helpful for you, rather than grouping it as guided imagery and saying that I don't like doing that ever. And if you are somebody who really enjoys guided imagery and metaphors are really helpful to you for understanding things, I'm really excited for you, because I think that this activity is going to work really well. Now, as with most guided imagery, I'm going to encourage you to either close your eyes or have a soft gaze, meaning that you're not focused on any particular thing. Set up a space for yourself where you can be alone, where you can be quiet, where you can have the space you need to be able to engage in this activity. Before we get started with this activity, I want you to take stock of the amount of distress that you're experiencing in this moment. And by distress, I mean anxiety or actual stress, or it could be you have a memory that just won't let you go, or you're experiencing shame or guilt, or you're just feeling poorly emotionally. Take stock of what that looks like for you and put it on a scale 1 to 10. 1 being no distress at all. I feel really good. 10 being the worst distress I think I've probably ever experienced in my life. We're gonna start by taking 2 deep breaths. So we'll breathe in and out. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And in and out. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. What I want you to do is I want you to continue breathing. And I want you to picture yourself in an empty space. This could be an empty room. It could be a void-like space. But in your mind's eye, picture yourself. And now I want you to begin to notice a container forming in front of you. Truly, it can be any size, any shape, based off of any idea. There are a few specific things that you should know about this container, though. The first is that it only has 1 entrance. That could be a one-way valve. That could be an electronic port. That could be a lid that only lets things in. What's important is just to recognize that this entry is only one way. The other thing I want you to take note of is that this container cannot be broken. It can't be broken into, it can't be broken open. That could either be because of how it was created, the material that makes it up, or some magical property that just keeps it from being destroyed. Another thing that I want you to know about this container is that when a substance or a material goes into it, it doesn't take up any space. There's this conversion that happens where it doesn't take up mass any longer. And so effectively, it can hold infinite amounts of material. What I want you to do now is I want you to explore this container. Imagine yourself feeling it, touching it, holding it, if it's big enough for you to hold. And as you do, I want you to visualize some sort of mechanism to activate this container. That might be opening the lid or turning it on or turning it towards yourself. And as you activate it, I want you to begin to notice the distress that you hold in your body right now. Picture it as some substance, either on you or within you. This could be a smoke or a vapor that's around you and within you. It could be ink or muck that is on your skin and your clothes. It could be weights that you're carrying around with you. And as you visualize this distress and activate this container, I want you to begin to visualize that distress leaving you and entering into this container where it takes up no space and it can only go in, it cannot come back out. What I have found is helpful for me is imagining that as I breathe out, this distress moves towards the container. Your container may have this ability to magnetically pull or vacuum in the distress from you. What's important is just that you engage in this process of allowing the distress that's on you or within you to move from you to the container. Take your time in this activity, even if it means pausing this video. Practice this activity, knowing that it may not be super effective right now. This is a new skill, a new muscle that you're training, and that's okay. As you practice this skill, it will not only become more effective, but you'll become more efficient at it as well. Before you leave this space with the container, I want you to imagine turning it off if you've turned it on, or closing it if you've opened it, and placing it somewhere in your mind's eye that's out of place and you don't have to carry it around, but also easily accessible if you need it again. Knowing that what's in there isn't taking up any space and it isn't going to break open. That distress is outside of you now, contained within this object and not getting out. Let's go ahead and take a deep breath in and out. 4, 3, 2, 1. I want you to take note of your level of distress in this moment. Go back to that scale that you did at the beginning with your level of distress and compare. See if there's been any difference. Now, this difference doesn't have to be dramatic. If it is for you, congratulations. This is a really helpful tool for you just by the numbers. If it's not, maybe it changed by 1 number or maybe 2. That's okay. Like I mentioned, this is something that you should practice. You will get better at it. Your brain will adapt to what we're trying to do, and you'll notice that things become a little bit easier in this process. Now let's dive into the safe place activity. I'll have you close your eyes and we'll take 2 more deep breaths. We'll breathe in and out. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And in and out. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. I want you to close your eyes and imagine an entry. Maybe it's a doorway, maybe it's a gate. Imagine a way for you to enter a place of safety. We're not going to get into what the place looks like yet. I want to really spend time on this entrance because there's a few things that you should take note of about this entry. The first is that you're the only one that is able to access this entry. That might be because only you know the code. It might be because only you know where this entry is. It might be because the door knows you and recognizes you and only lets you in. This door is sealed to anyone else. And in fact, the place within is separated from all other persons. No one else is able to access this place except for you. The other thing I want you to notice about this entry is that all of that lingering distress that was not able to be contained within the container isn't able to access this place either. That might be because there's some sort of sanitization process that occurs when you go through this entrance, or a receptacle where you just put that distress away for a moment, and when you come back out, you can pick it back up. The important thing is just that that distress doesn't really have a place here. It can't make it past that threshold. And what I want you to do is I want you to begin visualizing entering into this threshold for the first time. And as you do, begin to imagine a place of peace, a place of safety. This could be somewhere that is real or imagined or both. This is a place that holds everything that you could imagine to be comfortable. Blankets, fireplaces, a beach, the sun. And this might be a place where you want to pause the video, because I want you to simply build out a place of safety for you. Explore the different rooms or the different areas. Notice the textures, the temperature. Maybe there's food and drink for you here. Maybe there's music, or maybe it's still. Allow your mind to build a place that is calm and only yours. When you're ready, and only when you're ready, go ahead and take a deep breath and open your eyes and come back into the space you're in. Check in with yourself. That level of distress that you started with at the beginning of these activities, where is it now? There's often times when I work through this with a client where they actually almost fall asleep in session because Safeplace feels so calming to them. And what that means is that it's working, because that's the hope. We want to go from this place of distress to neutral to calm. It's important to recognize too that with this activity, we aren't trying to avoid what's going on. We're simply trying to be able to maintain functioning in the midst of it. The reason we use this with trauma work so often is because we're naturally pulling up a level of distress by thinking about traumatic events. And at the end of a session where we've been processing that trauma and maybe it hasn't fully processed, we want to have something that allows us to continue functioning outside of that space, to be able to manage some of the distress that is naturally coming up. But I think this activity actually is really helpful for other things as well. There may be a lot of times in our experiences of anxiety where we recognize that we're spiraling or our thoughts are just racing. And if we view that as a level of distress and chaos that we're experiencing and working through the container exercise to bring us to a place of neutral, where we're allowing that distress to leave us and to go somewhere else where we don't have to carry it, we're doing something really positive for our brains, and we're allowing some separation from that overwhelming stimulation. And then when we enter into Safeplace, we're allowing ourselves to experience calm, something that we desperately want to feel in those moments of anxiety, but feels so separated from. As with most of the activities on the collective, I want to take particular note of this one, that this might be a really great activity to engage in with a therapist. There are a lot of aspects of this that I think are helpful outside of the therapeutic relationship. And, I've carried this activity with me past my therapeutic experience for years, and it's been very helpful in lots of moments. But if this is something that's new for you, and maybe you're struggling through it, or you're not sure if you're using it in the right context, or really anything, I'd encourage you to reach out to either your therapist, or if you don't have one, to find one and to talk through how you can make this most helpful for you.